It's a bright new 2024, and this year the world is telling us to slow the down. Seriously, tell the executives you need to pump the brakes. Most of the start of the year videos are so ridiculously positive. As we've covered on this channel before, we are going to go over the Edelman's Trust Barometer. The past few years, the Edelman's Trust Barometer has not been overly positive, but given the fact that it is just so broad sweeping across 28 countries and several thousand, thousand people have responded to this survey, we cannot ignore the serious problems that are going to hinder our ability to create a better physical and virtual world. This year, however, we, the community industry, have been called out both as one of the biggest problems, but also we've become one of the most critical solutions. So this video is going to be long, and it's going to be really serious. There is a silver lining because every single problem in the Edelman's Trust Barometer points directly to the impact and ROI of online community. This is going to state unequivocally that we are the most critical program that all businesses require moving into 2024. And honestly, if we're planning to solve the world's problems by 2050, 2060, 2070. Now, if you've been subscribed to this channel since 2021, you know that we've been covering Edelman's Trust Barometer every single year. At the start of the year, this Edelman's Trust Barometer report is intended to give us the industry macro trends, but also in government, in media, in academia, and the relationship between business and all of these critical societal branches. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, in this video, I need to cover the criticality and the history of this report. Then we're going to jump into the report itself to take a look at what all is included. The Edelman's Trust Barometer tends to have a theme, and this theme is going to be focused primarily on innovation going way too fast. And naturally, I'm going to end this with how we as a community industry are going to be able to make a positive impact and turn all of this around. Let's start with why the Edelman's Trust Barometer is so important for the community industry. First and foremost, it's macro trends across all 4 areas where we are able to build online community. First, there's government infrastructure, not just the international infrastructure and not just in the United States, but it also relates to the intercultural and transcultural results of all of the governments in multiple countries interacting with one another. It's consistent data over the course of what is now 24 years, wherein 32,000 respondents have provided their feedback on how they think industry, governments, academics, and media actually interact. In other words, the barometer is one of the best ways that we can gauge all of the different scopes of communities. Now, I do want to state, unlike in prior years, that the very end of the report that you can find, link in the description, has a very critical supplemental section that discusses exactly how this research happens, specifically the different statistical tests that are used in order to compile data. And as a brief aside, this YouTube channel uses the shorts feature in order to give you MetricsMonday, where we're going to be able to cover the different theories and approaches and methodologies, the metric systems that brought about this report's stability. Let's now go ahead and move on to what precisely is in this report. Not exactly sunshine and rainbows.
The world is in a moment of distrust. We have 60% of people who come into any situation disbelieving.
In the Trust Barometer 2023, we've observed the move from division to polarization.
The 24 Edelman Trust Barometer found that there is in fact a 4th log on the fire of polarization. It started with the dispersion of authority, then the mass class divide, then we had the infodemic. Now we see that the acceptance of innovation, the idea that innovation is poorly managed, is actually causing further polarization in society.
Innovation has outpaced the implementation, leading to the public not trusting the vast majority of the infrastructure that they interact with.
There are consequences of poor implementation of innovation. Specifically, 2/3 of people tell us society's changing too quickly. It's not good for people like me. The system is biased to the wealthy. or capitalism doesn't work. You're going too fast. You're not explaining things to me. I don't feel heard.
Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because it's our job to be able to implement that, to actually negotiate and mediate these discussions between industry, the public, governance, academia, and especially the media. Our community is responsible for gauging the information diet of individuals in order to combat misinformation. The second one is the criticality and importance of implementing deliberative tactics within your online community scope by scope. The implementation is as important as innovation, and because industry is out of step, it's so important that we're able to partner with the other branches in order to bring back that sense of trust in governance and in academia. This is not a technology problem. Technology is all about innovation. Silicon Valley is all about breaking things and moving quickly in order to maintain stakeholdership on Wall Street instead of focusing on the actual adaptation and implementation of our technology on Main Street.
For the last 15 years, we've been working I'm the CEO of a company called C3 AI. We are the problem. This generative AI business is the real deal. It is not going away, and it changes everything. And you think for a minute that you're going to stop it, you can get over that because this is not stoppable.
Let's be sure to take the time to do innovation in a measured way.
And another major impact of this has been a complete and total financial and economic slowdown, which has led us to have to do more with less with a burden, which is the opposite way of where we need to go.
Gone through a historically incredible era where money was essentially free. And that's unlikely to return again. I don't think, I'm not an expert, but I don't think looking at the trend line that we're going to go back to where it was. And so it's becoming more and more important to figure out what are your priorities, what are the programs that have the biggest impact, and making sure that we're optimizing for them.
And that's where I have an ask for you midway through this. I want you to commit to ideas that might solve these problems. What do you think that you can do? Can you share this video with your executive team? Because your executives need to know this. Hi, executives, you really need to know this. Pump the brakes because your focus on innovation and your stakeholders is actually creating very hard to reverse problems in the world, including environmentalism, DEIB, social justice. All of these topics are now being placed unfairly on community managers that are not being trained in order to handle those problems. Let's talk about an example, something that is near and dear to our hearts and incredibly relevant for the year.
How are the technological developments that are overwhelming us going to have a big effect? How, for example, is artificial intelligence and AR and VR going to have an impact on how you practice your work?
So when we in community start to implement AI, as Richard and Todd and several of the other influencers in our space suggest, we need to experiment. We need to figure out exactly how AI can help with communities. But there's another side to the coin here. The deliberative discussion is going to require that we put communities in the driver's seat. We need to be in the passenger seat when it comes to how AI is supposed to impact us. And further, we need to allow the social trends and the negatives for AI to drive the discussion. I'm going to do another video here in the near future that I've been wanting to do for several years, but didn't feel comfortable really saying. And that's going to be about the three cultures of AI. The three cultures are those of engineers who are responsible for the technology, but who abjectly deny that they're not responsible for the way that individuals receive that technology. Looking at you, social media. The second one is the individuals like us, the people who ask, how is this cultural implication going to impact our virtual world? And how are we supposed to change our daily lives when we're implementing this stuff in order to better our communities? And the third one I call the financiers culture. This is the people who are making money off of these developments and therefore expect us to go very fast.
And you think for a minute that you're going to stop it, you can get over that because this is not stoppable.
This is the executive branch, the people who are responsible for the burden of remuneration. When we think about Web3, NFTs, crypto, when we think about the rise of Discord, when we think about the technological developments that led to this innovation implementation gap.
3 years ago and 2 years ago, everything was about cyber, it was about Bitcoin, it was about blockchain. This year, you walk up and down, everything is about AI and Gen AI.
That's what I'm talking about. So that leads us to the last thing in this report. We are developing not technological platforms or funnels that allow individuals to come in, but the breakdown of funnels and the movement from a platform into a cultural ecosystem, something that, again, Richard predicted.
I think in the past, it was common to try and satisfy these needs on a single platform. I think in the future, we're going to see more and more platforms on the audiences that the audience prefers to use. It means that programs themselves are going to have to span across multiple locations.
The Edelman's Trust Barometer explicitly states that in order to earn acceptance, we need to show that the innovation is vetted by scientists, by ethicists. We need to run this by our political infrastructure in order to make sure that they carefully understand what needs to happen, and we don't end up with completely blind moratoriums and changes in technology from people who don't necessarily understand what's going on.
Unfortunately, there's a growing number of bad faith actors, or what Amanda Ripley calls conflict entrepreneurs, that understand this human nature and take advantage of it to divide us for personal gain. The good news, however, is that once we better understand these natural impulses, they're easier to control. We can develop individual habits and organizational norms and ultimately community cultures that help us go beyond these kind of natural tendencies and have the kind of conversations we need to have.
Now, deliberative associative democracy is all about bringing people locally together in order to solve tough problems. But we've actually seen the reverse of this actively advocated, who are asking to rely on the development of industry, wherein government needs to step back.
We have many of the technologies, the engineers, even the policies to drive down global emissions and solve the climate challenge. But what keeps me up at night is that government red tape. Government needs to get out of the way and let the private sector build clean energy.
In the absence of that, we need to rely on the community industry. If industry is expected to lead this conversation, we need to ask executives to pump the brakes so that the community builders, all of us, are actually able to contribute environmental and public voices in a deliberative environment to the executive suite. We need to stop relying on moving quick and fast, because one of the primary takeaways that come from that situation is an integral silencing of a larger swath of people. They become audience members instead of community, and we only really treat them in community via funnels. And there's a breakdown of funnel development.
You know, after I've kind of added something to the cart and checked out, I'm kind of also hoping that you continue to show up in a way that adds value. Announcements around your, ERG efforts or how you're giving back to the community.
Okay, so what do we actually do about all of this? The first and foremost thing is that community intelligence platforms such as Common Room and Orbit allows us to transition from this funnel problem into a community ecosystem that doesn't rely so heavily on content moderation and funnels. You can actually get a promo code to Common Room in order to implement a community intelligence platform. So be sure to join the Discord community and maybe participate on the Patreon if you're willing. That means we can slow down. We're not creating 3 or 4 or 9 different blogs, and we can start focusing on slower content that is more collaborative and also higher value. We can bring ourselves as experts, social scientists, back into the public space because we're able to take more time to digest a greater amount of information all at once. That means we need to fix science's communication problem, but I want to posit one minor change. Our job is not to translate information and make complex information simpler. Instead, our job is to provide feedback and active development to our general public, again, in a deliberative fashion, and then inform the discussion and the conversation so that they are making the choice. Again, it's about being in that driver's seat. Okay, last section. I've talked exactly about what's in the report, why the report is so important to the community industry. So it's at this point where we get to those commitments. The Edelman's Trust Barometer says we need to focus on these 4 things: moving implementation back in step with invention and innovation. Just as we are doing on this channel, scientists, especially social scientists, need to reintegrate into our public, not to espouse information, but to guide deliberative decision making. Instead of focusing on these centralized CRMs and moving people closer and closer to our brand, we need to develop these community ecosystems. And ultimately, we need executives in industry to let go and give more power to the people. So we always talk about businesses having quote unquote core values. If we make an industry these core values, where every single step an executive makes isn't necessarily to support their remunerative tactics, but they actually ask what is better for our virtual world, we can take a step to lead social justice. We can collaborate with more people, and all we need to do is commit to slowing down. So that's it for the Edelman's Trust Barometer for this year. I get that it's bleak, but I also recognize that every single step of this requires community as a solution. So if you're an executive or if you're a community manager, here it is. This is the ROI of community, fixing our world. If you are interested in reviewing the past 2, you can see this one from 2 years back and this one from 1 year back. Be sure to subscribe as well, because we're going to delve further into the report. If you'd like to be a part of Patreon, you can click here on the link and support this channel and basically good academic research.